pregnant wife discovered her millionaire husband's secret baby with the mistress. Then something. The camera pans over a sprawling Beverly Hills estate, a grand mansion shimmering with wealth and elegance under the Californian sun. But beyond the gleaming marble floors and designer-clad guests lies a web of secrets on the brink of unraveling. Victoria Caldwell, a glowing mother-to-be, suspects her charismatic millionaire husband, Maxwell Pierce, is hiding something far more shocking than mere business deals. Whispers of infidelity swirl through the corridors, and the echo of a mysterious child's laughter threatens to topple their gilded life. In this story of privilege and betrayal, loyalties will be tested, hearts will be shattered, and love will face its darkest hour. Victoria Caldwell was a woman of many dreams. Growing up in a humble neighborhood in San Diego, she fantasized about a life of comfort, one free from the incessant worry of unpaid bills and second-hand clothes. From an early age, she displayed an uncanny determination. At 12, she was holding bake sales to help her mother pay rent. By 15, she had her sights set on scholarships, certain that education was her path to success. That unyielding drive carried her through college, where she studied marketing and graduated at the top of her class. She landed an entry-level position at a boutique advertising agency in Los Angeles, forging her own path in a cutthroat industry. Despite her youth, she soon earned accolades for her fresh ideas and remarkable focus. Yet, as unstoppable as Victoria's ambition was, no one could have predicted how fate would intertwine her life with a millionaire named Maxwell Pierce. Maxwell Pierce was the kind of man who could captivate an entire room merely by walking in. Born into wealth, he lived in a world where lavish parties at the Four Seasons and invitations to exclusive charity galas were the norm. He stood tall with broad shoulders and a magnetic presence that seemed to pull people into his orbit. His father, Gerald Pierce, had built a real estate empire spanning the West Coast and parts of Europe. Max, as his friends called him, was groomed from birth to inherit the empire, learning the intricacies of deals, negotiations, and power brokering. By the time he turned 30, Maxwell had already taken the reins of Pierce Real Estate Holdings, expanding it into a global conglomerate. He was fluent in corporate speak and PR spin, yet somehow maintained a down-to-earth charm that made him both relatable and unreachable at the same time. Their worlds collided at a lavish charity event in Beverly Hills. Victoria had been tasked by her advertising agency to manage the promotional campaign for the event, ensuring top-tier exposure. Maxwell arrived late, drawing gazes as soon as he stepped into the ballroom, exuding an effortless authority. Victoria, juggling last-minute details, found herself fumbling with a microphone cord. She cursed under her breath, frustrated as the wires tangled. Maxwell offered a quick, steadying hand, his voice a soft reassurance in the chaos. "Let me help." She looked up, meeting his steady blue eyes and polished smile. Sparks flickered in that moment, electric, undeniable. Later, they shared a dance, drifting across the marble floor as though the night itself had conspired to bring them together. By the end of the evening, Maxwell asked for her number. Despite her reservations, he was a millionaire heir. After all, she found herself saying yes. It was the start of something extraordinary, a whirlwind romance that would change both their lives forever. Their courtship was every bit the fairy tale. Maxwell whisked Victoria away to weekends in Napa Valley, sending her favorite flowers, pink peonies, to her office just because. He introduced her to a lifestyle she had once only glimpsed in glossy magazines: sunrise breakfasts served by private chefs, spontaneous shopping sprees down Rodeo Drive, exclusive events where they rubbed shoulders with celebrities and moguls. Victoria felt like she was living a dream, pinching herself daily to confirm it was real. As the weeks blurred into months, she discovered in Maxwell not just a wealthy benefactor but a surprisingly genuine soul. He remembered small details, her love for peppermint tea, her fear of thunderstorms, her fascination with impressionist art. His consideration dissolved any doubts she'd harbored. When he finally proposed on a private yacht off the coast of Catalina Island down on one knee, the sunset painting the horizon in pinks and golds, Victoria's eyes brimmed with tears. She said yes. From that moment forward, her life became an even grander adventure, one in which she could envision a future filled with love, success, and family. Their wedding was an extravagant yet intimate affair at a cliffside villa in Malibu. Overlooking the Pacific, the ceremony took place under a canopy of white roses and twinkling fairy lights. Dressed in a Vera Wang gown, Victoria glowed as she walked down the aisle. Maxwell, in a custom Tom Ford suit, looked equally radiant, his expression a mixture of pride and deep affection. Guests included Hollywood A-listers, prominent philanthropists, and high-profile business partners. Even Richard Branson made a brief appearance, exchanging pleasantries with Maxwell about a joint venture they'd once discussed. Despite the high society glamour, the moment that mattered most was the simple exchange of vows. Maxwell's voice trembled ever so slightly when he promised to love, cherish, and remain faithful to Victoria. The applause from the assembled crowd was thunderous, but to Victoria's ears, it all fell away, leaving only the resonating echo of their vows, binding them together in sacred union. Their honeymoon was equally splendid. Maxwell surprised Victoria with a trip to Bora Bora, where they stayed in an overwater bungalow with a glass floor that revealed vibrant coral and schools of exotic fish. There, the couple relished in the thrill of new marriage. In between snorkeling sessions and candlelit dinners, they talked about the future, what kind of house they might raise children in, whether they would keep living in Los Angeles or perhaps build a coastal retreat in Maui. They traded baby names with a playful seriousness that only deepened their bond. Victoria proposed Eleanor if it was a girl, after her grandmother, while Maxwell countered with Sebastian for a boy. Little did they know that life had a different, more complicated plan in store, and the conversation about family was about to take a hauntingly different shape than either of them could anticipate. Returning from Bora Bora, Victoria resumed her work at the advertising agency, though Maxwell encouraged her to join Pierce Real Estate Holdings in their marketing department. She declined politely, wishing to maintain a sense of independence. The couple settled into a comfortable routine in their hillside Bel Air mansion. Maxwell would often work from dawn until late evening, attending meetings, courting investors, and overseeing major deals. Victoria's schedule was flexible, allowing her to come home early and plan their social calendar. While the outside world viewed them as a quintessential power couple, behind the scenes, a subtle tension began to brew. It started with Maxwell taking calls in private and responding vaguely when Victoria asked him about them. At first, she chalked it up to the demands of big business. But the knot in her stomach tightened each time she watched him slip into another room, phone pressed to his ear, a guarded expression on his face. One night, after a grueling day at work, Victoria drifted off on the living room couch. She awoke to the sound of Maxwell's hushed voice echoing through the hallway. She glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. Maxwell rarely held late-night calls, and something about his tone sounded urgent, almost desperate. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that high-stakes deals in different time zones sometimes demanded odd hours. Still, curiosity got the better of her. She tiptoed closer to the study, pressing her ear against the heavy oak door. She picked up fragments. No, she doesn't suspect anything. I'll handle the support payments. We have to be careful. A surge of panic exploded in her chest. The words circled her mind, refusing to settle. Support payments. Careful about what? She backed away from the door, heart pounding as if the very air had thickened with danger. Over the next few weeks, Victoria became increasingly vigilant, searching for clues in Maxwell's behavior. He had grown distant, less affectionate, more easily irritable. Whenever she asked if something was wrong, he would wave her away, explaining that work stress was at an all-time high. She wanted to believe him, yet her instincts whispered that there was more than just business weighing on him. In an attempt to calm her suspicions, she confided in her closest friend, Samantha Brooks, a fellow marketing executive she'd known since college. Samantha listened intently over a brunch at the Ivy, urging Victoria to keep an eye out for any unusual activity. "If it's just work, you'll know," Samantha said, her voice steady. "But if it's something else, you have a right to the truth." Victoria nodded, thankful for the support, though uncertain how to proceed. Every day, she felt like a detective in her own marriage, scanning for evidence that would confirm or deny her worst fears. Then came the morning sickness. At first, Victoria chalked it up to a stomach bug, but when it persisted for over a week, she took a pregnancy test. The result was positive. She felt a surge of joy mingled with trepidation. A baby. Their baby. She pictured Maxwell's face lighting up with excitement. Yet a voice inside her conjured up doubts. What if he was too engrossed in his secret dealings to share her elation? Summoning her courage, she placed the test in a small gift box, adorned it with a ribbon, and left it on his nightstand with a handwritten note, "Ready for our next adventure." That evening, Maxwell found the box. He opened it slowly, eyes widening in genuine surprise. For a brief moment, his features softened with joy, the tension in his brow melting as he pulled Victoria into a tender embrace. "We're going to be parents," he whispered. In that moment, she believed everything would be all right. Buoyed by the prospect of becoming parents, Victoria and Maxwell enjoyed a brief resurgence of harmony. He accompanied her to the first prenatal appointments, inquiring about her diet and suggesting a maternity concierge service to make her life easier. They began discussing nursery designs, browsing through catalogues of high-end baby furniture. Their bedroom saw nights of laughter and shared excitement. Yet beneath that fragile calm, Victoria still sensed an undercurrent of secrecy. Late-night phone calls persisted, sometimes masked by Maxwell, claiming he needed to step out to the patio for fresh air. More than once she overheard him mutter the name Celia. Each time she felt a pang in her heart, uncertain who Celia was or what role she played in her husband's life. One day, Victoria followed Maxwell when he claimed he had a crucial meeting downtown. She felt guilty, but she had to know the truth. Keeping a safe distance in her sleek Mercedes SUV, she watched him drive to a less glamorous part of Los Angeles, a humble apartment complex far removed from the glitz of Beverly Hills. She parked discreetly, catching a glimpse of Maxwell stepping inside, glancing over his shoulder as if to ensure no one had followed. Victoria's pulse thundered in her ears. He was inside for nearly an hour. When he finally emerged, he wasn't alone. A slender woman with chestnut hair and a distraught expression accompanied him to his car. She was clutching something, a baby carrier. Victoria's breath caught in her throat as she saw the tiny, wriggling figure within the carrier. Maxwell placed a gentle hand on the baby's head before leaning in to kiss the woman's cheek. Victoria felt her world tilt violently, as if gravity had abandoned her. Confusion, betrayal, and anger warred within her. The evidence was too blatant to dismiss. Maxwell had a child with another woman. But how long had this been going on? Was this an affair that predated their marriage, or had it continued all along? As she sat behind the wheel, tears blurring her vision, Victoria struggled to breathe. She contemplated confronting him immediately, but fear gripped her. The meltdown in her emotions clashed with the life growing in her belly. She was pregnant with Maxwell's child, yet he already had a secret baby. The implications were overwhelming. Trembling, she drove home, her thoughts a jumbled mess of heartbreak and resolve. She needed a plan, some way to confront him and learn the truth, no matter how horrifying. That evening, Maxwell arrived home, greeting Victoria with a subdued warmth. She noticed the faint smell of baby powder lingering on his suit. Her stomach churned. She mustered the strength to act normal, deciding that an explosive confrontation would do no one any good, especially not her unborn child. Instead, she asked Samantha for help. The next day, they met in a discreet corner booth at a quiet cafe. Samantha listened wide-eyed as Victoria recounted everything she'd seen. "You need proof," Samantha advised, suggesting that Victoria hire a private investigator. Confronting him without evidence might lead him to hide even more. "You have to be strategic." Though the idea of employing a pie made her feel as if she'd stepped onto the set of a soap opera, Victoria realized the truth was already stranger than fiction. She agreed, determined to uncover every detail Maxwell had kept hidden. Enter Frank Delacroix, a grizzled private investigator who came highly recommended by Samantha's cousin, an attorney. He wasn't cheap, but he had a reputation for being relentless and discreet. Victoria handed him the bare essentials: Maxwell's schedule, the location of the apartment she'd followed him to, and the name Celia. She apologized for the vagueness, but Delacroix only nodded, his expression reassuring. "I've dealt with worse," he said. "Give me a week, and I'll have something concrete for you." Over the ensuing days, Victoria vacillated between dread and hope. She knew that once she received Delacroix's report, her life might change irreversibly. In her calmer moments, she clung to the possibility that maybe there was an explanation, an old friend's child, a relative in need. But the image of Maxwell's gentle touch on that baby's head haunted her, searing into her consciousness a truth that she could no longer deny. Time crawled by. Each day, Maxwell went about his routine, and Victoria found herself studying him like a stranger. She noticed subtle signs, the way he sometimes cradled his phone while typing messages in a corner, the guilty flicker in his eyes if she happened to catch him off guard. At night, when he curled up beside her in bed, she fought the urge to ask him point-blank who Celia was and whose baby he had cradled. But her resolve remained firm: wait for Delacroix. On the 6th day, the investigator texted her to meet at a small diner on the outskirts of town, far from any place Maxwell frequented. Victoria arrived early, sipping herbal tea while her anxiety soared. When Delacroix finally slid into the booth, she braced for impact. He handed her a slim manila folder, his eyes reflecting sympathy, as he said, "I'm sorry, Miss S. Pierce. It's worse than you thought." Heart-pounding, Victoria opened the folder. Inside were photos of Maxwell visiting Celia Parker at her modest apartment on 3 separate occasions. In each set, he held a small infant, barely a few months old. One particularly damning photo captured Maxwell tenderly kissing Celia on the forehead as she wiped tears from her eyes. Delacroix explained that Celia, age 26, was originally from Seattle and had moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career in modeling. She had apparently met Maxwell at a charity fashion show about a year before Victoria and Maxwell were married. "Looks like the affair started before your wedding," Delacroix added, his voice hushed. There are also records of money transfers from Maxwell's personal account to Celia over the past several months. Regular payments. Victoria's stomach twisted. Her temples throbbed. The confirmation felt like a physical blow. She had to force herself to breathe, to think of the growing life inside her. Finally, she managed to whisper, "And the baby? Is it Maxwell's?" Delacroix nodded gravely. "It seems very likely, ma'am. The birth certificate lists the father as unknown, but I have emails that suggest Maxwell's paternity. It's all in the report." Driving home from the diner, Victoria gripped the steering wheel with whitened knuckles. Her mind reeled with questions. Had Maxwell planned to leave her eventually? Or was he merely supporting Celia and the baby in secret? She thought back to their wedding vows, the lavish ceremony, the open bar, and the well-dressed crowd who cheered them on. How many people had known about this and kept silent? She fought back tears, refusing to let them obscure her vision. In the mansion's driveway, she turned off the engine and sat there for a long time, gazing at the immaculate landscaping, the imported roses that Maxwell had selected. It all felt like an elaborate facade. Finally, she gathered her courage, stepping out of the car as though entering a battlefield. She had no concrete plan, but she knew she couldn't keep the truth buried any longer. That night, she confronted Maxwell in the living room. The air was tense, crackling like a live wire. At first, he tried to deny everything, eyes darting in wild confusion as though searching for an escape. "What are you talking about, Victoria?" he hissed. "Are you feeling stressed? You need to rest." But when she dropped the manila folder on the coffee table, the color drained from his face. She watched him flip through the photos, the bank statements, and Delacroix as compiled evidence, each page like a dagger. His shoulders sagged. He slumped onto the couch, staring at the floor. Finally, in a ragged voice, he admitted that Celia had indeed borne his child a daughter named Aurora. The affair had begun before he even met Victoria. By the time he knew Celia was pregnant, he had already fallen in love with Victoria. Panicked, he tried to keep Celia a secret, hoping to do the right thing by supporting her financially without disrupting his new marriage. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and Maxwell's calculated plan was crumbling around him. The conversation exploded into a night of anguish and recrimination. Victoria's tears fell like rain. She demanded to know how he could stand at the altar, vow fidelity, while hiding something so monumental. Maxwell's defenses crumbled under her righteous anger. He stammered apologies, insisting that he never intended to hurt her, that he only wanted to protect her from pain and shield his business interests from scandal. "I love you," he repeated, voice trembling. That was real. It still is. But Victoria was inconsolable. "You lied to me," she screamed, "from the start. You let me walk into this marriage not knowing I was sharing you with another family." Their raised voices echoed through the mansion, turning the marble halls into a stage for a tragic play. In the end, Maxwell retreated to one of the guest rooms, leaving Victoria sobbing alone in the master bedroom, clutching her pregnant belly as though it were the only anchor she had left in a world gone mad. In the following days, Victoria took refuge at Samantha's condo. Needing distance to process the betrayal, Maxwell bombarded her phone with calls and texts, pleading to speak or meet. She ignored them initially, focusing instead on the well-being of her unborn child. Samantha, protective as ever, offered comfort in the form of late-night conversations and homemade soups. "You have every right to walk away," Samantha reminded her, "but if you still love him, you might want to consider professional help, couples therapy at least." Conflicted, Victoria weighed her options. She wasn't naive enough to think trust could be restored with a snap of her fingers. Yet part of her still remembered the man who had proposed on a yacht, the man who had held her hand in doctors' offices, the man who had wept tears of joy at the thought of becoming a father. She decided to meet Maxwell on neutral ground, a therapy office. Their first therapy session was tense. Dr. Ellen Rise, a calm, empathetic therapist with kind eyes, welcomed them into her softly lit office. Victoria sat on one couch, arms folded, while Maxwell perched on the opposite end, eyes downcast. "Let's start with honesty," Dr. Reyes began. "Maxwell, can you tell Victoria why you chose to hide the affair and the child?" Slowly, he opened up, recounting how he'd been overwhelmed by obligations, family business, public image, societal expectations. He confessed that he was torn between supporting Celia and wanting a fresh start with Victoria. He admitted to being terrified of losing everything if the truth came to light. Victoria listened quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks as she absorbed each word. She spoke about her shattered trust, her sense of betrayal, and her fear of raising her child amidst this chaos. By the end of the session, both were emotionally drained, yet oddly relieved to have a professional guiding them through the turbulent waters of their marriage. While therapy offered a glimmer of hope for their emotional healing, the external complications remained. Word of Maxwell's secret child began to spread, fueled by hushed whispers among the Pierces' social circle. Someone had spotted Maxwell at Celia's apartment. Someone else had seen Victoria storm out of the mansion. Before long, rumors floated around that Maxwell might have fathered another child out of wedlock, threatening the family's public image. Gerald Pierce, Maxwell's father, called an emergency meeting at the Pierce Real Estate Holdings office, summoning Maxwell to explain himself. Already under strain, Maxwell found himself in a confrontation with his own father, who was livid about how these revelations could affect the company's stock value and credibility. Gerald insisted on damage control, urging Maxwell to strike a deal with Celia to ensure her continued discretion. Maxwell balked at such a cold approach, but couldn't entirely dismiss his father's pragmatic concerns. Meanwhile, Victoria watched from the sidelines, torn between pity for Maxwell's predicament and disgust at how the family prioritized their fortune over moral reckoning. In the midst of this storm, Victoria found herself dealing with her own pregnancy complications. Stress took a toll on her body, frequent headaches, high blood pressure, and sleepless nights. Her doctor advised her to minimize anxiety, warning that excessive stress could endanger both her and the baby. This reality check forced Victoria to re-evaluate the situation. As much as she loathed Maxwell's betrayal, she also recognized that continuing to live in a perpetual state of rage would harm her unborn child. During one of the therapy sessions, Dr. Reyes offered a gentle nudge. For your own health, consider what you truly want. Is it to fight for this marriage and move forward, or is it to find closure and move on? Victoria had no easy answer. Maxwell, on his part, tried to demonstrate remorse through tangible actions. He cancelled meetings to accompany Victoria to her prenatal checkups, offered to legally formalize financial and emotional boundaries with Celia, and even suggested stepping down from the company temporarily to focus on his marriage. Though Victoria appreciated the gestures, the wounds were still fresh. It was one thing to see Maxwell's contrition, quite another to accept and trust him again. In private moments, she admitted to herself that she still loved him, even if that love was tangled with resentment. Some nights she lay awake thinking about Aurora, the innocent child at the center of this scandal. Part of her wanted to hate that baby, to see her as the embodiment of Maxwell's betrayal. Another part felt empathy. Aurora was an innocent soul who deserved a father's love, just as her own baby did. The next major upheaval occurred when Celia called Victoria directly. Maxwell had provided Celia's number to Dr. Reyes, hoping for a mediated conversation at some point, but Celia bypassed formalities, perhaps emboldened by her own desperation. When Victoria saw the unknown number flash on her phone, she almost didn't answer. Something made her pick up. Celia's trembling voice filled the line. She apologized for the pain she caused, insisting she never intended to ruin Maxwell's marriage. Tears punctuated her words as she described how she had fallen for Maxwell during a vulnerable time in her life, believing his promises before he vanished to pursue Victoria. I was left alone, pregnant and scared, Celia sobbed. He's helping with money, but it's not enough to feel secure. I want Aurora to know her father. Victoria was speechless. Rage and pity wrestled in her heart. She ended the call abruptly, needing time to process the magnitude of emotions that conversation had stirred. As Victoria relayed the call to Maxwell during their therapy session, Dr. Reyes suggested a three-way conversation with Celia to establish boundaries and expectations. Maxwell hesitated, fearing it would escalate tensions. But Victoria insisted. "This is our reality now," she declared. "We have to figure out how we're going to handle it." In the days leading up to that meeting, Victoria prayed for calm. She knew it would be a test of her emotional fortitude. The session itself took place in Dr. Reyes's office. Celia arrived cradling Aurora, who was now around 4 months old. The baby's soft coos tugged at Victoria's heart, reminding her of her own unborn child. Celia's eyes were red, her posture tense. Maxwell sat between the two women, looking as though he wished the floor would swallow him whole. Under Dr. Reyes's guidance, the conversation began. Victoria struggled to keep her voice steady as she told Celia how betrayed and humiliated she felt. Celia tearfully recounted how Maxwell had courted her, then vanished. Maxwell, shoulders hunched, apologized repeatedly, admitting his immaturity in handling the situation. Eventually, they discussed the practicalities of child support, visitation, and the emotional ramifications for everyone involved. Celia insisted that Aurora should know her father, and Maxwell agreed to be present in the child's life, provided it didn't end his marriage. The session ended in tears, but also with a tentative framework for how they might move forward. As Victoria left the office, her hand instinctively covered her abdomen. She could feel her own child's fluttering movements, and for a fleeting moment she wondered if there was room in Maxwell's life and heart for both babies. In the weeks that followed, Victoria felt like she was balancing on a thin wire, suspended between two worlds, the family she had dreamed of with Maxwell and the intruding presence of Celia and Aurora. Maxwell attempted to reassure her, yet each time he visited Celia's apartment to see his daughter, Victoria's insecurities flared. She found herself replaying mental images of them, imagining Maxwell holding Aurora with the same gentle reverence he'd once reserved for her alone. This emotional tightrope wore her down. She wasn't sure how much more her heart could take, nor did she know whether the baby she carried would one day share her father's affection with a half-sibling she hadn't even known existed until recently. To complicate matters further, the media caught wind of the scandal. A tabloid published blurry photos of Maxwell and Celia together, branding him as the Playboy heir with a secret love child. Overnight, the story went viral on gossip websites and social media. Paparazzi began loitering around the Pierce mansion, hoping to snag photos of Victoria, Maxwell, or even the elusive Celia. Gerald Pierce unleashed a furious tirade at Maxwell, blaming him for jeopardizing the company's sterling reputation. Victoria felt besieged in her own home, the gates hardly a barrier against the outside world's prying eyes. She took to wearing oversized sunglasses and hats whenever she stepped outside, not wanting her vulnerability to become fodder for tabloids. Maxwell tried to contain the fallout, hiring a crisis management firm to spin the narrative, but the damage was done. Their private pain had become a public spectacle. Amidst the chaos, Victoria experienced a scare. Late one night, she awoke with severe abdominal pains and dizziness. Fear surged through her, believing she might be losing the baby. Maxwell, startled from sleep, rushed her to the hospital. After hours of tests and monitoring, the doctors diagnosed it as stress-induced complications, warning her that any further escalation could threaten the pregnancy. Shaken to her core, Victoria realized her emotional turmoil was taking a tangible toll on her child's well-being. Maxwell, visibly distraught, stayed by her bedside, gripping her hand as tears glistened in his eyes. In that hospital room, overshadowed by fear and regret, they both vowed to prioritize her health and the baby above all else. It was a stark reminder that beyond the scandal, a fragile, precious life depended on them finding some semblance of peace. Following this health scare, Victoria made a pivotal decision. She would temporarily step away from the public eye and retreat to her family's old house in San Diego. Though the home was modest compared to the mansion, it offered a sense of familiarity and solace she desperately needed. Maxwell agreed it was best for her and the baby. He promised to handle the media frenzy in Los Angeles while Victoria could focus on resting and regaining her emotional balance. She found herself in the bedroom she had once shared with her younger sister, memories swirling the bunk beds, the glow in the dark stars on the ceiling. The humility of the setting contrasted sharply with her current life, yet it brought a strange sense of comfort. Each morning, she took a walk around the neighborhood, greeting old neighbors, inhaling the scent of jasmine from backyard gardens. Here, she wasn't the pregnant wife of a millionaire with a scandal. She was just Victoria Caldwell, trying to hold herself together for her unborn child. Maxwell visited her every weekend, driving down on Fridays to spend quality time. These visits were bittersweet. On one hand, she longed for his presence, for the love they once shared. On the other, she resented the betrayal that had led her to flee her own home. During one visit, he brought a plush teddy bear meant for the baby, tears pooling in his eyes as he apologized once more for the pain he caused. "I can't change the past," he said, voice choked with emotion. "All I can do is prove I'm still worthy of being your husband and our baby's father." Moved by his sincerity, Victoria allowed herself a moment of hope. Perhaps, with time and honesty, the fractures in their marriage could be repaired. But the spectre of Aurora lingered, along with the knowledge that Celia was still very much in the picture, reliant on Maxwell's financial and emotional support. The turning point came when Victoria's mother, Patricia Caldwell, sat her down in the cozy kitchen where Victoria had once done homework. Patricia was a gentle, pragmatic soul, someone who had known hardships and persevered. Over a cup of tea, Patricia gently touched Victoria's hand. "I'm not telling you what to do," she began, "but remember that people make mistakes, some bigger than others. If Maxwell is genuinely remorseful and willing to do the hard work, it might be worth giving him a chance. But you have to decide if you can truly forgive him. Without forgiveness, you'll never find peace." The words struck Victoria deeply. Forgiveness was a daunting challenge. Yet she recognized that harboring perpetual anger would eat away at her, harming both her and her baby. Perhaps, she reasoned, there was a path forward, though it would be fraught with emotional landmines. Slowly, Victoria began easing back into therapy sessions, this time with Maxwell joining remotely if he couldn't make the drive. Dr. Reyes guided them through trust-building exercises, encouraging open communication. Maxwell shared updates about his interactions with Aurora, who was growing rapidly and starting to babble. Victoria found herself experiencing a complicated mix of jealousy and tenderness. She resented the child's existence, but also felt drawn to her innocence. As her own belly expanded, she couldn't help but empathize with Celia's struggles of single parenthood. The emotional knots were far from untangled, but therapy allowed Victoria and Maxwell to have honest conversations without descending into accusations and tears. Through the process, Victoria discovered a hidden reservoir of strength within herself. She was fighting for her marriage and for the future of her child. Meanwhile, Celia's role remained ambiguous. She was grateful for Maxwell's financial support, but made it clear she didn't want to be a perpetual secret. Some nights, Maxwell and Victoria would argue because Celia wanted to attend certain public events, believing Aurora deserved recognition as a peeress. "She's not just some footnote in your legacy," Celia had insisted in an email Maxwell shared with Victoria. Victoria bristled at the idea, still reeling from the emotional fallout. But Dr. Reyes pointed out that from Celia's perspective, she was only advocating for her child's rightful place in Maxwell's life. This revelation weighed on Victoria, reminding her that while Celia might have been complicit in an affair, she was also a mother fighting for her child. It was a sobering realization that the situation had layers, each one more complex than the last. As the months progressed, Victoria's due date approached. She decided to return to Los Angeles, partly because she wanted to deliver the baby in a world-class hospital, and partly because she felt more prepared to face the challenges ahead. Maxwell welcomed her back to the mansion with a newly decorated nursery, painted in soft neutrals. He seemed genuinely committed to supporting her pregnancy, ensuring she had the best medical team, nutritionists, and even a mindfulness coach. The paparazzi presence had waned, moving on to fresher scandals, which offered a semblance of privacy. Victoria remained cautious, but she allowed herself to feel a hint of excitement about the impending birth. Somewhere in her heart, she prayed that the love they had might not be entirely lost. The baby, a boy, whom they'd decided to name Henry, arrived on a rainy afternoon in early spring. The labor was long and grueling, and Victoria felt surges of pain like she'd never experienced. Maxwell stayed by her side, whispering encouragement, tears in his eyes when he finally heard Henry's first cry. In that moment, a wave of overwhelming love washed over Victoria. She held Henry to her chest, marveling at the fragile life she had nurtured. All the betrayals and scandals receded into the background as she focused on her son. For a few blissful hours, it was just their mother, father, and child bonded in a cocoon of unconditional love. The peaceful haze of new parenthood lasted only a few days. When Celia found out Henry had been born, she sent a message unexpected but somewhat compassionate, congratulating Victoria and Maxwell. She even included a photo of Aurora, now toddling around and giggling. "Perhaps our children can meet someday," the note read. Victoria felt a jolt of fear and curiosity. Her instincts rebelled against the idea, but another part of her recognized that Henry and Aurora were half-siblings. Denying their bond might not be fair or sustainable in the long run. Over the next few weeks, Victoria was too overwhelmed by sleepless nights, feedings, and pediatric appointments to dwell on the matter. Yet it loomed in the background, an inevitable conversation about blending these fractured pieces of family. As Henry turned 3 months old, Victoria and Maxwell had adapted to an exhausting yet fulfilling rhythm of parenthood night feeds, diaper changes, colic episodes, and fleeting moments of pure wonder. During one of their therapy sessions, Dr. Rise brought up the possibility of introducing Aurora to Henry. "What are your long-term visions of family?" she asked gently. Victoria hesitated, uncertain if her heart could handle the sight of Maxwell doting on Aurora in the same way he doted on Henry. But she also sensed that continuing to avoid Aurora was like ignoring an elephant in the room. Maxwell, for his part, voiced a desire for Henry to know his sister, emphasizing that Aurora was his responsibility too. It was a tangled knot of fear, jealousy, and moral obligation. Eventually, Victoria agreed to a carefully orchestrated meeting at a neutral location, a child-friendly cafe with an enclosed playground. Celia arrived first, holding Aurora's tiny hand. The little girl had wispy brown hair and big, curious eyes. Victoria's heart thundered as she watched Aurora toddle around, giggling at the bright plastic slides. Then Maxwell appeared, carrying Henry in a baby carrier, with Victoria clutching the diaper bag. The atmosphere was fraught with tension, but also an undercurrent of hope. As Aurora waddled closer, Victoria braced herself for an emotional impact. Maxwell kneeled down, letting Aurora peek into Henry's carrier. The little girl giggled, pointing at him. Henry, barely aware, stared up with wide eyes. Despite the swirl of adult conflict, the children shared a simple, instinctive connection, a small symbol of innocence amidst the chaos. Watching them, Victoria felt tears pool in her eyes. A spark of compassion ignited in her chest, reminding her that these two babies were blameless, each deserving of love and unity. The meeting ended without major drama. Victoria was civil, Celia was cautious, and Maxwell tried his best to navigate the emotional landmines. Afterward, Victoria felt simultaneously drained and oddly at peace. She realized that while the path ahead was far from smooth, she was capable of finding moments of grace in the midst of turmoil. Over the ensuing months, these visits became a rare but consistent occurrence. Celia remained firm that she wanted Aurora to have a normal upbringing, but she also respected Victoria's boundaries, coordinating schedules through Maxwell and Dr. Reyes. Through it all, Maxwell sought to prove his loyalty to Victoria, no longer hiding or sneaking around, but openly communicating each step he took. Gradually, her resentment toward Aurora subsided, replaced by an acceptance that the child was an extension of Maxwell and deserved love. Back at Pierce Real Estate Holdings, Maxwell contended with the fallout of his scandal. The board questioned his leadership. Some investors expressed concern, and a proposed European expansion stalled amid swirling rumors. Gerald Pierce stepped in with measured support, acknowledging Maxwell's personal challenges, but also warning him that the business world was unforgiving. Nevertheless, Maxwell persisted, determined to demonstrate that his family life wouldn't hamper the company's success. Through strategic partnerships, charitable endeavors, and a renewed focus on transparent leadership, he began to rebuild the trust that had been shaken. In a surprising twist, Maxwell even invited Celia to attend a family-friendly charity event, though more for Aurora's sake than anything else, signaling a willingness to publicly acknowledge his daughter without shame. Victoria, watching from the sidelines, found herself wavering between pride in Maxwell's courage and lingering pangs of insecurity. Therapy continued to be a cornerstone of their lives. Dr. Reyes marveled at how far they'd come from the early, acrimonious sessions. Victoria worked tirelessly to forgive Maxwell, a gradual process marked by setbacks and breakthroughs. She learned to articulate her feelings without lapsing into rage, while Maxwell learned to listen without becoming defensive. They discussed everything from co-parenting structures to financial arrangements and how to handle future holidays. Sometimes it felt like they were planning a complicated merger rather than a family dynamic, but each step brought a tiny measure of healing. Victoria noticed that with each passing month, she felt less of the razor-sharp anger that once dominated her thoughts. The love that had once bound them was still there, tattered but not entirely severed. On Henry's first birthday, Victoria decided to do something that even she hadn't anticipated. She invited Celia and Aurora to the party. It was a small gathering, just a handful of friends, Samantha included, and immediate family. Celia arrived nervously, holding Aurora's hand. The tension in the air was palpable at first, but Henry's joyful babbling and Aurora's delighted laughter soon punctured the awkwardness. Victoria caught herself smiling as she watched Aurora try to help Henry open his presents, babbling words only a toddler could decipher. For the first time, Victoria sensed not just a grudging tolerance, but a genuine warmth stirring within her. She took Celia aside, and they had a cautious but honest conversation. "I'm not saying we'll ever be friends," Victoria began, "but our children are siblings. If they can love each other, maybe we can learn to at least respect each other." Celia nodded, eyes brimming with relief. In that moment, the seeds of a fragile but vital partnership were sown. As time moved on, life became a mosaic of complexities. Victoria and Maxwell settled into a routine that included Henry's daycare schedules, occasional blended family outings, and relentless board meetings. The scandal, once front-page news, slowly receded from the tabloids, replaced by newer controversies. public interest waned, and investors regained confidence in Maxwell as he delivered strong quarterly earnings for Pierce Real Estate Holdings. Meanwhile, Victoria found herself juggling motherhood and the possibility of returning to her advertising career. Some days were harder than others. Waves of old pain revisited her unexpectedly, a memory of the night she discovered Maxwell's secret, or the sight of an old photograph from their honeymoon. But each time she reached for the coping mechanisms Dr. Reyes had taught her, leaning on the slow, steady process of healing. One evening, as Henry slept soundly in his crib, Maxwell and Victoria sat together on the living room couch. The lights were dim, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioner. Maxwell tentatively placed his hand over hers. "I know I don't deserve it, but I hope you can see how hard I've tried to make amends," he said softly. Victoria turned to him, her eyes reflecting both tenderness and lingering hurt. "I see it," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm just still scared sometimes. Scared you'll hurt me again." Maxwell gently pulled her into an embrace. "I know. I swear I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I've changed." In that moment, Victoria allowed herself the luxury of leaning into his warmth, feeling the rise and fall of his chest. Perhaps love wasn't about perfection, but about enduring the trials that life hurled at them. Over the next year, little milestones underscored their progress. Henry took his first steps across the living room, while Aurora giggled in delight on a playdate arranged by Celia and Victoria. Celia began dating someone new, an entrepreneur she met through a mutual friend. Victoria felt an inexplicable sense of relief, knowing Celia's focus wasn't solely on Maxwell. Yet, an undercurrent of tension always lingered, as though a single misstep could unravel the fragile equilibrium they'd built. Still, through therapy and a collective willingness to grow, they managed to navigate the labyrinthine path of a blended, unconventional family. 2 years after Henry's birth, Victoria discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with less spectacle, but no less joy. Maxwell clutched her in a tight embrace when she revealed the positive test. They told Samantha and Celia, now an unexpected ally in the domain of motherhood, who both expressed genuine happiness for them. The new baby arrived months later, a girl they named Eleanor, after Victoria's grandmother. Holding Eleanor in her arms, Victoria felt a sweet, poignant ache. She was forging a family with a man who had once shattered her trust, yet their love had survived. In the quiet hush of the hospital room, with Maxwell's adoring gaze fixed on Eleanor, Victoria felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Looking back on the journey, Victoria could hardly recognize the naive bride who once believed in a perfect marriage, untouched by secrets. She had learned that real love was messy, scarred by betrayals and shaped by redemption. Maxwell had evolved from a reckless millionaire heir to a man humbled by his mistakes, committed to being a better husband and father. Their children, Henry, Eleanor, and Aurora, symbolized both the pain of the past and the hope of the future. Though life was far from the pristine fairy tale Victoria had once envisioned, it had gained a depth and meaning she never thought possible. In the end, it wasn't the illusions of perfection that bound them together, but their shared resilience in the face of adversity, forging a fragile yet unbreakable bond. And so, Victoria's story stands as a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of a heart willing to heal. The path she navigated was strewn with betrayal, heartbreak, and uncertainty, but also moments of compassion, unity, and profound love. Through countless therapy sessions, raw confrontations, and acts of courage, she found a way to create a life that honored both her own worth and the innocent children at the heart of it all. If this tale moved you, if it made you reflect on the complexities of love, the capacity for second chances, or the strength required to rebuild trust, then please show your support. Like this video, share it with someone who might need a reminder that even the darkest betrayals can lead to unexpected light, and subscribe for more real-life dramas that prove every twist in the road can lead to a new beginning.